I had a mystical time interviewing Angela Winter. Angela shares about the relationship between beauty and death, a shamanic journey with an owl, and the process of birth being one of great opening and challenge. Angela Winter creates songs about beauty and death, like you might hear at a Renaissance fair during the apocalypse. Minimalist lute like ukulele meets otherworldly vocals, shimmering guitars, drones, overtones, and witchery. Winter's debut album, Hollow, explores themes of mysticism and myth, loss and letting go, and the space that opens after a release, which allows something new to be born. Her second album, Frost, is a snow and ice baby due out in 2020. She once performed at Carnegie Hall, and in addition to her own shows, she is open for John Cale from the Velvet Underground. I hope you enjoy this interview.
Hi, Angela.
Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you said yes to this conversation about.
You can't say no to you. I'm really happy that you invited me. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you are right about that. That it can be difficult to say no. And I'm really appreciative that you said yes to this conversation about grief and liberation and the work that you do in the world. And we know each other from Carborough, where I used to live.
Right.
I don't remember when we first met. You may, but we've known each other for a while, and we've met at your house and done ceremony and ritual around the moon and built altars and done magic and had deep conversations, and you're a dear friend of mine. So it's so great to be here with you.
I'm happy to do this with you, Michelle.
Yeah. So I'm going to invite us to just take a moment to center and ground before we dive into the questions. And so you can find a comfortable way to be in your body.
Okay.
And just take a moment to turn your attention to your breath and begin to feel your inhales and exhales. And now begin to deepen and lengthen your breath in your body and offer a longer breath in, longer breath out. And take a moment to notice how you feel physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Notice what is present for you at this time. And now bring your awareness to your heart, your heartbeat, your heart space. Notice what is present in your heart right now. And take 5 deep inhales and exhales. And when you feel ready, you can blink open your eyes. Just take a moment to reorient to the space. So, as you know, we're going to have a conversation about grief and liberation and rituals. And I would love for you to share some about what you do in the world.
Sure. Yeah. So my primary work now is to, well, I saw a shaman once and he said my mission was to bring beauty to the world with my voice. And I'm a singer and composer, musician, writer. And more, I'm stepping into that place of service with my music and my writing, and just trying to bring it forward into the world.
Mm-hmm. And given that we're going to talk about grief and liberation, how do you feel like you're bringing beauty to the world through your voice and your offerings? How does what you offer connect with grief and liberation, if that word resonates? And there may be another word that resonates for you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I released my first album kind of late in life. It was in 2018 in the fall, and it was called Hollow. And when I was writing it, I used this touchstone. It was a line from the poet Wallace Stevens from a poem called Sunday Morning. And in it, he writes, "Death is the mother of beauty. For unto her alone shall come fulfillment to our dreams and our desires." And I feel that, so that was such a powerful idea to encounter. It kind of stopped me in the best way. And I thought about it, and I feel that that grief and beauty are connected, that there is, and that sorrow and beauty are connected, and that death and beauty are indeed connected. There's something very beautiful about acknowledging limits, acknowledging the opposite polarity of life, and these things flow back and forth with each other. That when we do that, there's opportunity to see how beautiful life is in the smallest moments, in the most ordinary moments all around us all the time. And so it's sort of an attentional shift that I feel is really important.
Mm-hmm. And why do you feel like it's important for us, like as a collective, to be working with or practicing or being with what you named about life and death, the polarity or beauty and death, the connections you just named? Like, why might it be important on a collective scale for us to be present to beauty and death?
Well, we're being forced to deal with it, aren't we? This is a time of, as we all know, intense disruption, great change, lots of transformation, some good, some not so great, some catastrophic. And I feel like we, as a society here in this country and also as a human family all over the world, are being forced to deal with a lot of change, a lot of rapid change. So the extent to which we can acknowledge that and understand that this is where we are as a species right now, as a one human family right now, and just honor what's happening and be able to deal with it effectively while not falling into total despair, existential, despair, which is really on a lot of people's hearts and minds right now, understandably so. How do we collectively and individually grapple with these things that are happening? And I feel that one answer is practice, regular practice of the art of letting go, the art of acknowledging the opposite polarity of life, which is death, and the understanding that limits are part of life on this planet, which is something that we don't like to hear often, you know?
Right. Humans don't like to be limited, or to let go, really, right? There's a lot of attachment. And how do you practice letting go? Like, what does the art of letting go look like for you in practice?
Hmm. Focusing on that breath in meditation and allowing an exhale and being with that, sort of in the deepest body sense. In any moment, there's that practice. Just sort of witnessing the exhalation. Letting go of what no longer serves, whether it's a situation or a relationship, something that has clearly come to an end, to consciously acknowledge that and to make an ending, if possible, with the other person or with the situation, and to honor what has been and to let it go. That's like deep, difficult work to do, but that's part of what I like to practice. It's like finding those threshold points or those transition points and being as conscious as possible and deliberate as possible as I walk under that arbor. You know, I walk through the door, I say goodbye and turn and then acknowledge what's arising. It's hard. I'm not good at it. You know, like this is my life's work, and I feel like I'm teaching what I need to learn most. And so this is why my music is oriented this way.
Yeah, can you share some about your music and what you've witnessed as far as how it supports people in the art of letting go? Like, what do you know about what you're creating, right? And its connection to letting go, and how do you inspire the practice of letting go in others? What do you understand about that from your experience of, performing and birthing the music?
I think that when I started to perform this music out in the world, I noticed that rooms full of people would come into silence. And I'd be in these open mics in bars. It was pretty rowdy and fun, and people were there to have fun and be entertained and entertain. And there's like, that was great. It was also not what I was really doing. And so I wasn't really an easy fit, and I was scared of like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, if this is going to be well received. And what I found was that people would just stop and pause and get still, and the whole room would get still. It wouldn't happen every time, but more often than not it would. And I didn't really quite understand I wasn't trying to evoke that kind of reaction. I was just performing the music. But whenever it would happen, it would feel right. There's a sense of, oh yeah, this is what this is about. And so I felt like I was a vehicle for something that was coming through that wanted to be seen. And I think that part of what wanted to be seen was this honoring of slowness and grief and beauty and richness and the present moment. Sort of a quiet moment. And people then, as I continued to perform, people would come to me later and say, I didn't tell you this, but I was really wrestling with a hard month of like this. I heard that this woman had been in a lawsuit, and for an entire month she was really fighting and struggling, and my music was her go-to, like to settle her nervous system, to calm down and to be present. And she was just really grateful that was there as a resource. I have a friend whose daughter likes to listen to it right before she goes to sleep at night, which is kind of, I was like, really? but there's something, I think, that for certain people is serving as a resource, a calming, sort of bringing them peace, maybe, and then some people it's inspiring to get into their own work and to reconnect with their creativity and to get going on what they really most want to do and put it out in the world, because time is precious and we've got to do our work while we're here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear in what you said, I hear you inspire people to clarify their work and to do their work and to recognize time is limited, right? And so and whether or not we're letting go, things are being let go, right? Like that's the process of being alive. And I also hear the ease that's been reflected back to you from folks who are listening to your music or engaging with your music, which feels bigger than music, to allow them to find some ease. And so I know you, and I'm not sure the process of birthing Hollow was easy. And it may have clarified your work, but I don't think that was easy either.
It was hell. Birth is hard, you know? I mean, you're in the tunnel, and transformation requires a sacrifice. That's what I've learned during this process. And man, I don't know, it was way more than I thought it was going to take. What I left on the floor of my bedroom while I was, sobbing my way. Right before I released this album, there was a hurricane, 2 hurricanes. My, musicians were falling by the wayside. It was just really a demanding time. And I would do it again in a heartbeat, because that's what this work required. For whatever reason, it had to be out in the world, and I just had to go through what I went through, because that was what was.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask about rituals and practices. And I know with Hollow that an owl was definitely part of your shamanic journey of birthing Hollow. And I wonder if you could share some about your connection with the natural world. And you can share about the owl too, but your connection with the natural world, because it seems like the natural world is communicating. I mean, it communicates with us all the time, and
Right.
And you're clear about the connection and your connection with source or spirit in that way through the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
So could you talk some about what you understand from the natural world and how the natural world supported you in birthing Hollow?
Sure. Yeah. What I understand from the natural world, not nearly as much as it probably wants me to understand, that it wants us all to understand. I know that the whole world is alive. That was a lyric in one of the songs that came through. The Lovers, inspired by a solar eclipse, the total eclipse in 2017. All I can say is, when I was a little girl, I was born to a very young mother, and I had that had its difficulties in a lot of ways, but I think one of the best things about it was I was born into a 3-generational household, and my grandmother was still, my great-grandmother was still alive at the time. 4 generations, if you count me. My great-grandmother was still alive. Her name was Poppy, and she was, bedbound, and I was a baby, and so we spent a lot of time together, and she would read to me and feed me peas. My first memories are on her lap as a baby. And she taught me to love the birds. And we would go look at the birds out the window. And apparently my mom tells me that after mama, my first word was birdie. So I have always had this affinity for the avian world. And when I was recording Hollow, I had a very strange series of encounters with a barred owl who showed up in January of 2018. And it was really, I mean, I don't know if you want me to tell this, if we have time to tell this
Yes,
story.
tell the story.
Okay. Well, it was strange. I was, she came to me 4 times, which has never happened before. I've had encounters with nature and with animals, but this was quite unusual. And one night I was the front garden. I've got a motion sensor light right outside my front door, and it got tripped. And I thought, oh, maybe it's this little black cat that I had been hanging out with. He had befriended me, neighbor's cat. And so I opened the door, and sure enough, that little guy was out there. And I was like, oh, I got to go pick him up. So I went out. It's cold, and he was sitting near the carport. And when I picked him up, I saw this flash of wings just rise up off of the carport roof, and just silence, So I thought, oh my gosh, it must be an owl. And the second time the owl arrived was the very next morning. I was going out like at 6 a.m. to go to a yoga class. And it was cold and it was dark. And I opened the door, and there's a barred owl sitting 2 feet away on a plant stand looking at me like, hi, I've been waiting. And I just was gobsmacked by it. I mean, she was beautiful, and she just was utterly still. And we stood there for the longest time, just looking at each other. And then finally she flew away. And I thought, whoa, okay. Later that night, in a dream, she came to me for the third time. And in the dream, I was where the cat was, under the arbor. And she was on the carport where she was the night prior. And in the dream, she spoke to me in owl language about the music that I had written. And somehow I understood her. And then the fourth and last time she came was the very next morning. I had told my husband about the dream and all these crazy encounters. And he had left for work, and I was standing at the front window looking out into the garden. I was standing there with coffee in my hand, and I saw her body out in the garden near the street. And I was just so horrified by that, because she was clearly not moving. And so I got gloves and I went out, and she looked like she had maybe been hit by a car, just from how her wings were bent. And so I picked her up, and that weekend I gave her a ceremonial burial. I didn't know what else to do. I just was like, well, this is a special situation. I need to bury her. And as I was digging the frozen ground, I mean, it was really hard to get it done. And I was working with her, and I felt her spirit near. And she told me that I should name my album Hollow after a song that I had already written of that name, whose lyrics didn't really make that much sense to me until that moment. Suddenly there was just this whole shamanic understanding of that song that flowed in when I was working with her body. And she was just so beautiful, even in death, and I didn't want to let her go. It was like I rested her on my heart just to feel her wings on me once. And then I had to let her go. And it was so hard. But I knew that I had to do that. And then her spirit is what helped me through the process of the release of the album, and has seen me through a lot of trials since then. Just something about her showing up. It was like this acknowledgement of like, yes, this is your work to do. You better do it. Keep going. And the natural world is with you. And it's with us all. And this music has to get out there. So that's what my sense was from all of that. It was a wild time.
I remember some of the texts about the owl and her body. And it's so interesting when you when you were sharing that story, your album is behind you, the cover, the owl, but I hadn't noticed before until you shared that story. And I was like, oh my goodness, like there's the, like I felt that energy. Yeah, it was really interesting, like that spirit's with you. And I'm curious to know some about other rituals in addition to your connection with the natural world and birds and the avian world. I am curious to know if there are other rituals or practices you engage to support you in being with beauty and death in the way you've been talking about.
Yeah, there is. I have a little house that I built for my ancestors that is on the wall in my bedroom. It's a little special corner, it's tiny. And it has pictures of the people who I know, some that my mom sent me. And I talk with them. I bring them offerings every week and I have a conversation. So just connecting back with the line behind me feels important to acknowledge that I'm like the end of those lines. They all converge in me, and the DNA, comes through my blood. And so I don't know, something about that conversation with the ancestors feels really important to acknowledge and to grieve the loss, but also just honor all the beings who came before. Honoring the turns of the evolution of the moon cycles with my goddesses feels really healing and supportive. Anytime when people come together, that's just so important. And it's rare for me. I'm in kind of a OCD hermit type, like I'm an extreme introvert and I'm always in a creative cave. And so it's hard for me to move out into the world and be with people. So when I can, with certain special folks, get together and honor those natural cycles and check in with each other about, how are you and how can I support you and how can we support each other? Anytime that is at play, it just feels really nourishing and a powerful reminder that we're not alone in this world. And the more we can move into community with each other, the better it feels we'll be able to get through these next times, if we've got people with us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we certainly can't do this alone, right? Respond to what's happening on our own culturally and politically, and the shifts that are happening right now. And can you share some about, I feel like you've done some of this in what you shared, and I wonder if there are other lessons you've learned from the process of grieving, if there are some lessons that grief or making the space to grieve has taught you.
Some lessons from grief.
Or death. We've been using death
Right.
and beauty, right, instead of grief
Right.
and liberation. So
I'm looking at Well, yeah, that grief is the great leveler, right? We all have death in our lives to greater or lesser degrees. And it's a place where we could theoretically actually connect with each other and find common ground. In this death-defying culture or denying culture, it's often a place that if people are right in the deepest process of grief can feel so alone with it, because we are humans together, but we've got the diversity in how we grieve, right? And each of us, what might feel good to me might not feel good to you at all, as far as like receiving support for some sort of grief process we're going through. So how to find that commonality and place where we can grieve together, and free ourselves together while honoring that diversity, and different styles. I don't know if that really answers your question, but I feel like it's a great opportunity that we keep missing as a culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this theme has come up in other conversations about grief and liberation. The idea that intimacy is created when we actually are in space together and honor that we are, all of us experience loss, right? Each one of us. So that's what I hear in what you just, or heard in what you just offered. And just the reminder that all of us grieve, right? And in a culture that doesn't necessarily support us in having space to do so, and certainly not in community, and to develop intimacy or deep connection in that way. And I think you're right. People feel, so often people feel isolated in their experience of grief because there isn't space to actually process it or talk about it or recognize that it's the leveler, right? It's the thing all of us experience.
Right. I mean, this year has been really a challenging one on a lot of levels for a lot of people. For me, I went through the death of my estranged father, and that was earlier this year. And when I was in the thick of it, like right after, I just remember feeling like it was like I was walking through switchblades or something. Because, first of all, very few people were able to slow down enough to really see what was going on. Like our culture's moving at breakneck speed, right? And everybody's got their own things going on. You know, we're all super busy. We're all in different places. So how to even connect with people outside of like going to a specific grief support group, you know, something that's like a dedicated space. It's like, how can we support each other when we're in some of our most painful places of loss and grieving, when we're all moving so fast? I think that's just a really hard question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just feeling unseen sometimes when you're in the thick of it. You know, I just read a story. I tried to find it. I don't know which culture does this, but I recently read a story about a culture where when a family has a death, and the people who live in that tribe or village hear about it, everybody moves a piece of furniture or something from their home outside that night. And so when the family grieving emerges, they see an acknowledgement, just like nobody says anything, but it's like the whole world has changed outside, visually, tangibly. And just even something that simple honors what is. It's just like, I don't even know what it would feel like to be living in a place like that. I think it would be pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Me too. And the theme of pausing has come up. Your question about we're moving, you know, or just reflection. We're moving so quickly, and what that does, a byproduct of that, is that people feel unseen in their experience and in their grief. And we do it individually and collectively, right? Because we're grieving big atrocities, horrific things, whether or not we know it. We are. They're present for us. They're affecting us. And so I wonder in your mind, what it could look like for culture and the way we've been talking about to prioritize space to grieve in order to find some some liberation or beauty, right? Or to remember the beauty, again, the language we've been using. Like what, maybe it's the furniture outside of our homes or something else, right? What would that look like for you? What do you imagine we could create or cultivate to prioritize this space to collectively grieve?
It's funny because I almost, I one of my mantras is dwell in possibility, that great line from Emily Dickinson. But I am, as you're asking this, discovering that I haven't dwelt in possibility here because part of me just doesn't believe it's even possible now with technology, with this sort of fractured attention spans, all the change. But at the same time, I know that's not true, because we are co-creating our reality and our world. So I would say it's a really good question, Michelle. It's a really good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know. But I feel like it would involve a lot of slowing down, a lot of honoring reality, the reality of embodied creatures on a natural world planet, right? Our physical beings, and then all aspects of ourself, obviously, emotions and spirit, mind. But I don't know. This is going to be one that I sit with for a while. What would it look like?
Mm-hmm. What would your version of furniture, like placing a piece of furniture outside of your home to acknowledge loss, someone else's loss? What would that look like for you? Like
for me, getting a damn paper card in the mail. Okay. I'm like this old school person who just the fact of someone taking a moment and sending a small, like a postcard or something physical and tangible that arrives for you, that someone has taken like 3 minutes on, but a really juicy 3 minutes, right? I see you. I love you. What can I do? Or I'm here and I'm sorry and I see you. For me, it would be, that would have made all the difference in the world. The Jehovah's Witnesses were writing me. Mm-hmm. They found my name in my father's obituary. I got handwritten letters, long letters and religious tracts from Jehovah's Witnesses. Ooh. But only a couple cards from people who know me. And that would have felt like furniture moving for me. Mm-hmm. But everyone's different, obviously, and that's the catch.
Yeah, I think the invitation you're offering is for us to think about what our version would be, right? If it's not placing a piece of furniture outside of the home to honor someone else's loss or the fact they're grieving, what is it, and how can we at least acknowledge loss? Like, right. Yes, it's everyone may want something different, and we're like, I think, culturally starving for acknowledgement around what we're grieving.
Right.
Because when we acknowledge on a collective scale what we're grieving, we have to reckon with what it's like we have to reckon with the reality we've co-created.
Yeah.
As you said. So I think that there's resistance there. And I think we've lost some of our practices and rituals just because of how culture's been constructed.
Right. Well. Right. Well, and with so much online discourse where you can just press a heart or or make a little comment and move on. I mean, I think that grief requires a lot more than that. And that is something, and it's not the end all, right? I feel like we're moving into a phase where we're being invited to remember the older ways of, being in our bodies and making our food and making our clothes and growing our food and working with bees and like, you know, I think that the more we can connect with people authentically in slower ways that feel like there's something of your consciousness and your spirit and your heart coming through a phone call, showing up with a tray of brownies, you know, something. I think that that would make a big difference to a lot of people. Yeah.
So this is, I'm going to ask one more question before I invite you to share what might be coming up in 2020 or the way people can find Hollow. And of course, that'll be on our webpage too for the summit. I think what we're talking about connects with this question, which is what does collective liberation or acknowledgement of beauty or being in our beauty mean to you? Like what, how do we create that? What does it look like? What does it mean to you? And I'm saying liberation and I'm going to beauty because that's the frame we've been using.
I think that, yeah, I mean, beauty works, but also I love liberation. I mean, freedom is like one of our highest values, right? As humans, and we all deserve freedom. We all deserve liberation. And so what does that mean collectively? To me, it means seeing ourselves ever more as a human family, as earthlings together. Can I swear?
Mm-hmm.
In the shit together. We are in the shit together. While honoring diversity, while honoring difference, but also understanding that we are earthlings and what is happening all around us is inviting us to connect with that really rapidly. And that we're not the only beings on this planet. And that despite attempts to travel to Mars and wild worlds, this is the one that I feel that we need to do our work on and care for each other. So the extent to which we can do that and fast, collective liberation, that's what that means to me.
I would love for you to share about how people can find Hollow or sign up for your newsletter. And if there's anything coming up in 2020 that you know about, right, that you're offering that you want to share. This is going to air the end of January. So share some about how we can find you and stay connected.
Sure. Yeah. I think the best thing to do would be to go to my website, angelawinter.com. And there I have a sign up for my newsletter, which is called The Auspices. I tell these stories like the one I told about the owl, about other encounters I've had out in nature, and keep people updated about musical matters and shows and recordings and things. But mostly it's for you, the reader, to have a taste of these weird, wild encounters with the natural world, and also get a sense of, you know, a touchstone that the whole world is alive and that we're all here breathing together in it. So angelawinter.com, and my album Hollow, there's a page on my site called Listen. It's got all the links to all the streaming. It's on Spotify and Bandcamp, and I'm offering a little half off Bandcamp sales. There's a discount code I think you guys are going to put on the website somewhere for people who watch the summit. So yeah, happy gift for y'all. And as far as what's coming up in 2020, I need to get off my butt and book a lot of new shows. Yeah, it's the life of an independent musician is very full. I'll say it that way. But I think that I'm going to move into recording and releasing my second album, which will be called Frost. It's a collection of musical composition settings of Robert Frost poems that are ice and snow covered and all about life and death as seen through the lens of nature again. And I am in discussions about potentially another project. So to be determined. Yeah, but I'd love for people to come and find me on my site and say hello and yeah, let me know how I could support.
Well, thank you for being you and for what you offer and gift to us on the planet, and for Hollow and the owl, and just your ability to listen and receive messages. And it's been a joy to talk to you today. So thank you for saying yes to this.
I'm glad I did. And thank you for gathering us all together in this space. It feels really important what you've created here, this virtual summit, for all of us to come and reflect on these very important topics.
Thank you, dear friend.
Yes, dear friend.